Katie? Hi. Okay, Katie will serve as secretary. All right. We can move on to our fifth agenda item, which is the approval of the March meeting minutes, which I have right in front of me here. Do we move to approve the March meeting minutes? Move to approve. Second. Okay. Approval of the March meeting minutes.
I'm not gonna vote because I wasn't here.
Thanks, Melinda.
Yeah, just to clarify.
Yeah. We'll move on to the virtual public comment. Do we have anyone ready to speak tonight?
Let me check, and I'm just getting a little trickle in from folks online that they can't hear. So I unmuted my computer. But Karen, could you see if I don't know if you can get the room audio?
Check.
Okay.
Set for the room audio, and it looks like it's picking it up as I speak.
Okay. Let's do a little test run here with folks online. We are hitting the public comment portion of the meeting. So if you would like to speak in the meeting tonight, if you could virtually raise your hand, I can try to unmute you. Okay, but it's working now. Okay. It looks like the audio is working. So please send me a note in the Q&A if you're unable to hear us, and I'll try to adjust it. But until then, we do have one person ready to speak. If there are others online that would also like to speak under public comment, I just want to make sure you know to virtually raise your hand, and I'll call on you. For right now, we have one. Lynn Siegel is ready to speak, and Lynn, you should be able to unmute.
Yeah, with Sundance coming and with the Metropolitan District, we can't afford the water demand this is going to come bring to Boulder. We cannot. So what are you going to do about it, Rab? This scam of Metropolitan District is exactly what it is, a scam. It brings more police, more fire, more infrastructure. Then in 10 years, when Sundance is gone, we're stuck with it. They can bond, they can compound interest, and they can go up to a mill levy of 5 mills or something and tax us indirectly through their businesses in the Metropolitan District that will have increased rates to pay for all of this. That ultimately we will pay when we utilize those businesses. That's a problem for me. As if we don't have enough inflation in Boulder presently for housing. We don't need it for commercial either. Because you have less money to pay for your housing. You have less money to pay for your goods and services because everything's inflated with a Metropolitan District. Where does Rab weigh in on the Metro District? Where was Rab just absent in that discussion? Water use is not an issue for you in this community? To these businesses in this Metropolitan District? To Sundance? To all the people that it's going to flood to Boulder? And then when they come here, they're going to come back to buy houses and to cause greater demand and to cause housing prices to go up. and the land value to go up. And this compounded interest and these bonds and these loans that are on the public's back. It's not this panacea that this metro district is going to help us out. It's not. And where was RAB when you could have done something about it for the water use?
Thank you, Lynn. Is there anyone else online that would like to speak under public comment? All right, I don't see any others. You should be all set.
Thank you, Lynn, for your comments. Joe, did you want to speak?
Yeah, so if it's okay, I might want to speak to that. What Lynn was talking about, city council here in April voted to allow creation of metropolitan districts within city limits, and the commenter Lynn had a question about RAB's role in that. And of course, I'm not the expert on city charter, but the board's purview specifically is not to involve itself in those types of matters. And so that was really just a council item. And a metropolitan district generally is a structure that allows a funding mechanism for developers that want to develop within the city. So that's some context of what those comments were about.
Just for clarification, the metropolitan districts, it's like can create tax increment financing structures and result in.
Yep.
Okay. We'll move on to item number 7 on the agenda now, on the water supply update from staff. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, great. Some years there's nothing to see here and not much to talk about. This is not one of those years. But for context, for our water supply update, this is something that we do for the board every year in April, and we formally make an announcement about our situation, typically on or around May 1st. And if you think about the water operational year, like bank accounts, this is the time of year when we know what our starting balance is for the water supply operations for the year. And most years we have decent snowpack, good storage in our reservoirs, and a good supply from Northern Water, which is also one of our sources. This year, two out of 3 of those things are pretty good. But as everyone knows, it's been a really dry year. Snowpack is low. I know there's a lot of interest in this topic for 2026. So our team tonight will walk you through our thinking. This item will be led by Isabel Laritier. She's a water resources project manager, and she oversees our water rights accounting, which is a really important role in our operation, very complicated. And in that role, she coordinates very closely with our field operations staff, others in water resources, and the water treatment staff to optimize use of our supply, which that can mean different things in different years. This year, it's the focus will be on preserving our storage. Before I turn it over to Isabel, though, I know there's a lot of interest in the Colorado River situation. And we talked, I think, in the last meeting about potentially having a Northern Water representative attend even tonight. The good news is we do have that visit arranged. It'll be in June. Just for a variety of reasons, June fit better. And I don't think that issue is going anywhere anytime soon, unfortunately. But several of our water resources staff and myself and Kim Hutton, our water resources manager, just recently attended the Northern Water Spring Symposium. And we heard some great panel discussion on the Colorado River directly from people who are involved in the operating guidelines, so we'll talk about our supply and our situation with Isabel first, and then I believe Kim is online and she can, when we're done with that, she can summarize what we heard from the Northern Water meeting and kind of use that as a primer for the June visit. So with that, we're ready to go. I'll turn it over to Isabel.
Thank you, Joe. Hi, everyone. My name is Isabel Laertier. As Joe said, I'm the Water Resources Project Manager here at the city. Our Water Resources team handles operations and planning of the city's municipal water supply. Within that group, I manage the day-to-day operations of our water rights. So determining how much water we can take from the river or from storage into our system to meet daily demands, which change every day. I'll be providing a quick update related to the water supply, and as mentioned, it's no surprise, conditions are dry, but we'll go into more detail about that. We'll be going over water supply conditions and a variety of indicators for what the year might look like, as well as planned water conservation messaging for this year, given the city's recent drought watch declaration. And I'll leave time for questions at the end too. First, I'll just briefly talk about our water supply system for context. Here we have a map of Boulder, where the lower part is the eastern part of the city, and the upper part shows further west. We rely on 3 sources of water for the city. 2 of those sources are in the Boulder Creek Basin. The North Boulder Creek and Middle Boulder Creek watersheds are shown in blue on the left there. They provide around 2/3 of our water supply. We divert store water from those 2 watersheds and carry that water down to the Batasso treatment plant through a series of pipelines shown in blue. And our service area is shown in red there, near the bottom. We also receive water from the headwaters of the Colorado River through projects operated by Northern Water, the Colorado Big Thompson Project, or CBT, and the Windy Gap Project. Those areas are identified in the tan portion up at the top. About 1/3 of our supplies come from that space. Water is collected on the western slope, brought over to the east side, and conveyed to various water users in the South Platte Basin. And Boulder gets water from these projects from Harder Lake through a pipeline that goes directly to our Boulder Reservoir Water Treatment Plant, also known as the 63rd Street Treatment Plant, which is then distributed out to the community. So because Boulder gets its water from these multiple watersheds, that's one thing that contributes to our water supply being resilient for dry years. Our drought plan, which was recently updated in 2022, provides guidance on whether to declare drought, and if we do, how to implement water use restrictions to meet target water savings goals. The plan considers varying degrees of response to drought. Drought watch involves increasing communications around water conservation and promoting voluntary water use reductions. For example, watering along less frequently. It's a great tool to promote water conservation when it's dry, but mandatory restrictions are not triggered. The city is currently in a drought watch. Drought stages 1 through 3 include additional messaging and also have specific water conservation targets with mandatory water restriction. For example, in drought stage 1, we would aim for up to 20% reduction in demands, and to achieve that, we would implement rules such as limiting the number of days a person can drink their water. To help us decide which drought stage we might consider, the drought plan uses a metric we call the Projected Storage Index, or PSI. The metric takes the sum of projected storage both up in our watershed and throughout Northern Water's CBT system, and divides that total by our citywide demands. We start calculating this value in February, but we typically wait until May 1st to use the PSI to determine whether or not mandatory watering restrictions are necessary. Even though the PSI determination is formally made on May 1st, we're already taking actions outlined in our drought plan to respond to drought conditions, including increased water conservation messaging and the city's April 1st drought watch declaration. Based on what we know right now, the PSI will likely land comfortably above the threshold where we might consider stage 1 mandatory drought restrictions. Where that trigger is shown here at 0.85. Stage 2 and 3 triggers are also identified on the chart below. The primary reason this metric is expected to be relatively high, despite how dry it's been, include the fact that our citywide demands are 30% lower than what they used to be back in the early 2000s. And the fact that reservoir levels in both the cities and Northern Waters reservoirs are in a good position right now heading into this dry year. Although we expect our PSI to be above these thresholds, we're being proactive in operating our system more conservatively and promoting water conservation messaging, which we'll discuss shortly. So the PSI is one tool that we use in evaluating the drought conditions. We support it with other data and observations, both locally and regionally. Additional indicators we track, as mentioned, are snowpack, stream flow, regional drought conditions, and reservoir storage. And I'll run through a variety of data that we look at related with these indicators. Here we have a map of snowpack conditions, specifically snow water equivalent, or SWE. SWE represents the amount of water present if you were to take a column of snow and melt it down. So the metric takes into account the fact that light, fluffy snow has less water than the same amount of wet, dense snow. There's a network of sites across the Western US that we track for snow conditions over a wider area. So the South Platte Basin, which is kind of towards the top right there, which includes the Boulder Creek watershed, is currently around 27% of median. We also track the Colorado Headwaters Basin as an indicator of CBT supplies, and that basin is currently around 22% of median. So this map helps illustrate why reservoir storage is so critical in the Western US to help communities endure the drier conditions like we have this year. So this year, Northern Water issued a higher than average CBT quota of 80%, which is up 10% from the annual average quota. The CBT system is intended to be a supplemental supply, so it is often higher in dry years, which is, again, one reason Boulder's combined water supply is so resilient. So as you probably know, most of the city's water comes from snowmelt. And there are 2 snowpack sites within the Boulder Creek Basin that we rely on regularly for local conditions. University Camp is located on our property in the North Boulder Creek watershed near Silver Lake. In this graph here, the line represents the current snowpack, and the blue shaded area shows the 30-year median. And we're currently at 48% median at University Camp. So peak snowpack is usually around May 1st, but we anticipate that we already hit the peak snowpack back in mid-March, which is one reason the city declared a drought watch at the 1st. This is the Lake Eldora snowpack site, which is located above Barker Reservoir in the Middle Boulder Creek watershed, and it is at a lower elevation than the University campsite. Snow at Lake Eldora is already done melting, which is about 6 weeks earlier than usual. So in addition to these 2 local sites which we track, we also participate in a regional group that performs flights above various watersheds with special equipment to estimate the snow across the entire watershed. So the robust data that comes out of those flights is useful to us because they're over a wider area. They help corroborate the conditions that we see on the ground at our local sites, and they can better inform stream flow projection. So this year, the flights took place over our watershed on March 20th and identified a bit more snowpack at higher elevations, around 10 to 11,000 feet, compared to what our two local snowpack sites showed. We also look at stream flow forecasts as we transition from winter into spring. As the snow melts, it transforms into stream flow, which provides our water supply as we either divert that water directly from the river or divert the water into storage. Stream flow forecasts help us anticipate what conditions to expect as the season progresses. So there are a variety of sources that we look at for stream flow forecasting, and here are just two sources that both show around 65 to 70% of average stream flow for Boulder Creek, and a bit lower in the upper Colorado River at 52%. These projections typically represent forecasts for April through July. So although we did see some snow melt in March this year, those flows are not captured in these numbers. The low stream flow projections are similar to 2002 conditions. So in most years, we're fairly confident we'll fill our reservoirs, but given the dry conditions this year, we may or may not be able to fill. The last time we did not fill and spill our reservoirs was in 2002. As I mentioned previously, we have seen some early season snow melts. So our reservoirs have already started to store water for the year. So right now, Boulder's combined mountain reservoir storage is in good shape, as we see here, tracking near average amounts for this time of year. And we're regularly optimizing operations to do our best to capture and preserve storage as much as we can. We also look at regional drought indicators for context. And one great resource, although it's pretty broad scale, is the weekly US drought monitor maps. So as you get darker in color from yellow to red, that indicates more severe drought conditions. And you can see here in the South Platte Basin in Boulder County, which is marked there, that drought conditions are currently categorized as extreme. So drought conditions will likely continue to worsen across the state, and we see it in the form of lower soil moisture, high fire danger, and higher water demand across the east. So to summarize our current water supply, snowpack is well below average this year, and stream flow forecasts are also well below average. However, we do have strong storage reserves from previous years, and Northern Water has set higher than average CBT quota at 8%. So based on the PSI, we do not anticipate hitting a drought stage 1 trigger or a need for mandatory water use restrictions on May 1st. Instead, we'll continue to promote voluntary water reductions consistent with the city's current drought watch declaration, which I'll describe shortly. We'll continue to monitor conditions over the summer to track if there's a need to update the drought status. So given the drier conditions we're experiencing, as we mentioned, we do plan to ramp up our water conservation messaging throughout the community all summer through what we call a drought watch. So before we get into the voluntary reductions that we're promoting, just a reminder that we do have already some water use rules that apply to all city uses of water, regardless of drought conditions. So here, for example, no sprinkler irrigation from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., which is a new rule that was added with the recent WaterWise landscape code change, and a few other rules shown here. With the drought watch, We're also implementing voluntary water reduction. The one message that you've hopefully seen out in the community is to wait to water your grass until May, since grass can stay dormant this time of year. In early May, we also plan to start encouraging limiting sprinkler irrigation to 2 times a week. We also have other simple but effective actions that will promote, for example, letting your grass grow longer before cutting it, taking shorter showers. We hope that voluntary action will achieve up to 10% water savings, given our community's shared commitment to resource conservation and environmental stewardship. And we'll continue to monitor the needs throughout the summer. Thank you for your time, and we'll go ahead and open it up to any questions that you have for the group.
Thank you, Isabel. That's very helpful. I guess I have a question. So, May 1st is the official date for making the drought declaration or whatever, but you mentioned that there's gonna be monitoring throughout the summer. So if we have very high temperatures and very little precipitation, is there the possibility that drought 1 we'll declare drought 1 later in the summer?
I can hop in. Crystal Morey, Senior Water Resources Engineer in our Utilities Department. That May 1 date is really based on a lot of modeling we've done in terms of stressing our system and anticipating when we would need those restrictions. And so based on that past modeling, we don't anticipate we would need to increase our drought response through the end of the year. But we're also seeing conditions that are historic.
Right.
And so that's something we're tracking really closely in terms of our reservoir storage and how our community water demands are changing over time. And so I don't want to commit to never, but we're feeling in a comfortable position and we'll keep monitoring it.
I might add to that the team is what I see behind the scenes and the complexity of operating the system. The team is tracking closely to optimize for these conditions. But if it worsened or stayed like it is, we can always adapt at any time if we see the need to. And I think the drought plan gives us the flexibility to do that, but agree 100% with the way Crystal explained that.
I have a couple of questions and I apologize because I'm new and these may be obvious to everybody else, but with the PSI, the demand, I mean, just like Northern changes its allocation based on whether it's drought or not, demand typically goes up in drought years, so your demand number in that calculation, I assume, is also, it's not just following a trend line, it's sensitive to the fact that demand is going to be higher this year.
Yeah, so particularly there's a reason we presented a range within that graphic because we're doing about 20 different sensitivity analyses on like, well, what if this snowpack changes or what if our demand changes a little bit? But in the formal calculation, what we do is the 90th percentile of the last 10 years, which is around 19,000 acre feet. We have not seen demands that high in a very, very long time. And 2024 in particular was a good year that was really hot and dry, and we expected our community demand to jump up, and it didn't. And a big reason of that is we've seen a lot of those lawn conversions around town that, you know, where people are converting to water-wise landscaping. And so that type of landscaping doesn't need to peak as much with the hot and dry conditions in the way that turf grass does.
Okay. All right, I have 2 other questions.
Great.
One, Isabel talked about the fact that you're meeting with other jurisdictions, that there's groups, I assume Boulder, all the jurisdictions in Boulder County may be on the meeting. If, you know, Erie already did some really extreme things, although they backed off a little bit. If the rest of the cities in Boulder County are not just doing watch, but are doing mandatory restrictions, notwithstanding the fact that there's a formula, does that affect whether we could go to drought 1 because everybody else around us is, and we look. There, there's some other kinds of pressures that might apply.
I'm happy to take that, and I know Crystal and the team, at their level, meet with, I think, a group of 40 different water providers, but kind of a front range drought watch group. And they're separately kind of taking a lead role with the Boulder County cities and meeting with them. Because it can get really confusing for the public if everyone's doing something different. Although there are differences in people's systems and their water supply, so we'd expect some variation. But so they're meeting and talking about that. And then just a few weeks ago, similarly, I met with neighboring municipalities, public works directors, and we all talked about what our situations were. And I think everyone is, there are some exceptions, the bigger metro providers like Denver Water definitely have had some messaging, but I think most are thinking voluntary reductions, just like we are. And most cities feel like they have enough storage to get them through this year and beyond. And so I think lots of coordination going on, and we're thinking about those things. And for sure, even in the presentation that Isabel did tonight, we don't just blindly run the numbers and don't take into account all of those other things. There's a ton of judgment that comes into play.
Sure. And you're talking all the time, because in 2002, the municipalities were chastised for being late to
Yes,
do something.
yes,
Those were some very meetings.
yes, for sure.
2002.
I think in 2002, most cities did not have, in Colorado, did not have a formal drought plan. But because of that, they do now.
Right, and then my last question for Boulder, and this may be a little provincial because it's something that's near and dear to my heart, is what happens to the in-stream flow protection during this kind of a year?
Right, so the in-stream flow protection, so the city has a portfolio of water rights that we've dedicated for use for in-stream flow protection during various segments.
Isabel, I was involved
Oh,
with the state.
you do better than I do, probably.
So, that's fine.
So because each of those rights in that portfolio of rights has its historical priority or administration number, those in-stream flow rights that we have available to us to protect flows in the creek are subject to water rights administration, just like any other water right on the creek. So just as an example, typically in most years, even for the very end of the summer, into September, sometimes we have fewer rights available to us to protect in the creek. So we kind of have to follow along, just like every other. The in-stream flow right is kind of, just like any other water right, with its seniority, to follow those kind of rules that state sets when they're administering. I don't know, Crystal or Layla, if you want to.
Yeah, I can add that during a drought watch, we do not intend to pull back our in-stream flow protection. So those will remain, but as Isabel mentioned, how much we have available under those water rights might be less this year to protect the.
And if I can tack on also to that, Layla Parker, Water Resources Senior Project Manager. We actually can formally pull back the in-stream water rights once we have implemented mandatory water use restrictions. So if we had gone to drought stage 1, we then get to pull those back. So it's actually more protective for in-stream flow if we're not entering into mandatory water use restrictions. So it's an interesting trade-off for the creek.
Thank you.
Questions? Melinda asked one of the ones I want to ask. So I just may be naive, but so to say, I was quite curious about the Northern Water because I assumed, oh, Colorado rivers in this. In very difficult situations, yet.
Yeah.
That's the way they operate, is they'll provide more water. And we don't have Northern Water here. I'm happy to defer this for 2 months, but I don't know if any of you want to explain what you understand about how it's just curious about how this works.
Yeah, and it's a relevant question for tonight, and Northern Water considers their system and the water that they have for their allottees as a supplemental supply. And cities and people who are part of that system are supposed to have their own rights. And the way it's set up, they actually, if they have the storage, they give out more water in dry years and less water in wet years. And at the Northern Water meeting that Kim and others and I went to, they said that in past years, they might have actually done 100% quota. Under conditions like this, and there would have been pressure to do so. And I think for me, that was actually validating for how we're thinking about our system, because they're taking a more cautious, guarded approach, just in case this goes on for several years. And I think they've done modeling to show that with an 80% quota, if we had the same exact conditions next year, they could still do at least a 70% in a second year. And so they're kind of playing the long game and thinking, how would we manage this if it went on multiple years in a row? And we're thinking similarly.
Okay, I was assuming and betting on this El Nino forecast. And there is, I should say, this it's been in literature, there's something called whipsaw.
Mhm.
That where this in California, wet to dry years, just from one year to the next to Colorado. Massive storage. Could be better than I think, so.
Oh, sure.
Other question I have is two more on the runoff, so some was runoff early, right? Do we know what's happened to that water? Some of it ended up, reservoir. Ground. And some or all that's done.
Yeah, I think we captured what we could, what came through the stream system. I think there is certainly some loss to like dry groundwater. But our reservoir storage graph shown earlier is pretty, it's not typical that we store quite so much in that early part of the season. So we tried to take advantage of what we could as it was starting to melt through into the creeks. The sporadic Colorado weather is tricky to work with because we capture the water when it's there, but
like, how this are.
Evaluation. I'm just curious with groundwater, do we have any data on how much reduction we do typically see from groundwater? What is the public response to that? Yeah. Community response in terms of water conservation. The 30% reduction we've seen from the early 2000s has been voluntary based. I think a lot of those voluntary assumptions, you do see a 10 to 20% reduction, but a lot of those studies have been based in the earlier 2000s period. And so we are maybe not anticipating a 20% reduction right off the bat by telling everyone to focus on conservation, but aiming for that 10%.
This is the first time we have implemented the drought watch, so we don't have experience to look on.
I have thoughts on that, though. I've been talking to Chris and others about just watching what's happening with our demand right now. And some of this, I think, is just a combination of experience and opinion. I do think the message has gotten through to people to hold off on turning their sprinkler systems on. We are seeing demand trend up a little bit higher than it would normally be, or higher than average. And just between what I see with my observations of the number of kind of yellow and brown grasses, there's like in my neighborhood and yards. And I believe those numbers would be much higher if we had not had the messaging. So I think I can't quantify it, but I'm pretty confident we're already saving what we would be doing if we weren't.
Yeah, and I was gonna say as well, I think some of like the private providers in town have also put up that messaging of you don't need to water 3 days a week, this is pulled back, and so I don't know if the city has been communicating with them, but it seems like good messaging all around.
As someone who does not remember 2002, can you talk a little bit more about what happened in 2002? We didn't have the drought plan that was formal then, but like what were the conditions like this time of year or in August, and how did the city respond to that?
There were probably 3 of us who, I actually started with the city in 2005, but I was in consulting. The city of Boulder was one of the clients of the firm that I worked for. And I worked on Boulder projects, so I could see what was happening. I think Joanna might have been here. I think it was, as Melinda said, more reactionary for us and others of just like, there was no messaging starting in March or April. It was May 1st and like, we have to shut things down. And we went to mandatory restrictions because we didn't have a plan. I think staff at the time were just using their judgment. And I think, you know, some cities like Denver have gone to mandatory restrictions and their system's different than a lot of others. But that is also a whole other creature of managing that. and the enforcement and everything, and just how well our community responded to that in the moment in 2002. And then if you saw our annual demand numbers, they have been dropping ever since. We believe our community will respond in the moment now just to the voluntary recommendations.
Joe, can I just add two things?
Sure.
To that? So the other context is that in the 90s, the Colorado River community was talking about surplus agreements. So the 90s were wet. And there weren't shortage guidelines, right? So 2002 was extraordinary because of the previous decade. And the other thing, and this may be something that comes up in other conversations, is the panic of the water providers in 2002. There were water providers who raised rates because they don't make money if people aren't watering, and they need the money to protect their staff and infrastructure. So there were surcharges that went into effect at some of the large water suppliers. And that was infuriating to users.
For sure. And what an interesting teaser for the next item on our agenda, that we do have a water budget rate structure, and in our drought plan, we do have the ability to lower the amount allocated to people's water budgets, which is a lever the city could pull if we needed to.
So I'm just wondering, since we're talking about these approaches, is there a philosophy that you'd rather go easy early on and then ramp up later if you have to, as opposed to going harder early on and then maybe easing up later if you can afford to? Even.
I mean, taking a cautious approach, we have a lot of latitude on what we can do in a drought watch, and the team is using its judgment to recommend the measures that they think will be the most effective. And cities have invested in the infrastructure and these supplies, and Boulder is no different, to be able to withstand the multi-year drought. And so if we go right to the maximum in the beginning, I know it crosses my mind. I worry a little bit that could wear thin later on if we find ourselves in a spot where we really need to. And if this goes on year after year after year, Boulder's indoor demand is around 10 or 11,000 MGD. Our annual use, considering outside, is like 17,500. And so the lever that we have in demand management, if we had to, we could restrict all outdoor watering and preserve that 10, 11, 12,000 all year round. Just knowing what we have in storage in our situation, that's unnecessary, right?
Yeah. And, you know, I was part of the crowd in 2022 when the drought plan was put in place, and we got to see all of the effort and analysis that went into creating this framework that was meant to be used to help make informed decisions by the city. And you're following the recommendation of that framework with heightened monitoring and the flexibility that you've built into that. So it would make sense to do a drought watch instead of drought reading based on where we are.
Most around us are in the same place, not everyone. And I forgot to mention this earlier, but for sure, the town of Erie had some pretty dramatic messaging earlier in this season. And in talking to their staff and what we know about their situation, if it was just the drought conditions, they would have been where everyone else is, but they had, one of their key reservoirs was down for a big capital project. And so they had a temporary window where they really had to tighten things up, and I think they've moved beyond that now.
Is Kim going to jump?
I think so. And I'm curious, I know we're having potentially some
Yes,
audio.
I'm so sorry, we were. And now I believe the audio and visual are totally fixed, so I apologize for the disruption. Please, if you're online and you're still having issues, message us in the Q&A, but we're hearing good. So
Yeah.
no issue, and I'm gonna move back with the transition.
We're good. To give quickly to talk about the Colorado River, and we're spending some time on this topic tonight. We normally like to keep things pretty tight, but this is an important conversation, so. If you're good, we can keep the one as planned and have Kim go next. Kim, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Can you all hear me?
Perfectly.
Oh, great. All right. Hi, everybody. Sorry, I'm not able to be there with you in person tonight. My name's Kim Hutton. I'm the Water Resources Manager. And as Joe mentioned, Northern Water does a symposium twice a year just to give updates to its water users. And at the Spring Water User Symposium in early April, one of the panels included the Colorado River Commissioner and another representative from the Colorado Water Conservation Board, who are tightly involved in the negotiations for the Colorado River. So they had a great panel discussion, and we just wanted to share a couple slides with you from that presentation and a couple take-home points. But as Joe mentioned, we'll have representatives from Northern Water talking to us in June, and so they can provide, I think, a bit more of a conversation about the situation there. And when we say they're negotiating right now, what is happening is the upper basin states and the lower basin states are in the process of negotiating new terms for the interim operating criteria for Lake Powell and Lake Mead. The current guidelines are set to expire in October. And they have been in place for, these are roughly 20 years. So coming down to the end, to the wire for this. And so there, I think the upper basin and lower basin states are, it sounds like, not making great progress, and sounds like they're kind of philosophically kind of opposed to some fundamental considerations. And I'm going to share a slide here. And this is something that the Colorado River Commissioner, Becky Mitchell, shared with us. And I think it's a really great perspective. Let's see here. Can you all see that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So what's shown on here is the lower basin states, their water use over the last 5 years is shown in the orange bars. And the upper basin states water use is shown in the yellow bars. The lower basin states apportionment for the Colorado River is that top blue dashed line. So their apportionment is about 8.5 million acre feet per year. And that's the lower basin states apportionment. The upper basin state apportionment, which includes Colorado, is 7.5 million acre feet per year. So you can see that the lower basin states over the last 5 years and longer have been using more than their apportionment. And the upper basin states have been using less than their apportionment. And I'm going to go to one other slide, and then I'll just move this over, and then I'll talk through a couple key takeaways. So then this slide is showing, so the way the system operates, Lake Powell sits higher on the river than Lake Mead. When the lower basin states want water, they take delivery of it through Lake Mead, and they just call for water. And so if they want water, they place an order essentially, and the tap is open and water is released from Lake Mead. And then the way the interim operating guidelines work is, kind of have to balance out what the elevations are or storage levels are between Powell and Mead. So the blue here is showing how much water is coming into Lake Powell. And then the red is showing how much water is leaving Lake Powell in order to transfer water to Lake Mead. And so you can, again, see that in most years, 2023 was a wet year, the amount of water coming into Lake Powell is less, into Lake Powell is less than what's leaving. And so when you hear on the news, the levels of Lake Powell are dropping, Lake Mead is dropping. That's what the data is showing. And the reason, again, is the lower basin states are kind of using more than their apportionment. And the way it kind of works actually is that it's almost like they just have a tap. And they can just turn on the tap whenever they want water, the lower basin. Upper basin, on the other hand, is kind of living within the hydrologic conditions that we're subject to. So this year, snowpack is really low. We don't have a lot of water. We're not using a lot of water. However, the lower basin states haven't really been operating according to hydrology. They just, if they want water, they just open the tap from Lake Mead and the water flows. And so that's kind of where the philosophical difference between the upper and lower basin states is coming from. I think the final point that they made that was kind of, I think a good take-home message was the upper basin states, their position is they want the lower basin states to live within the means of the river. The lower basin states want the upper basin states to share in any shortages. But what that looks like is if the upper basin states were to conserve water, that water is just moving down into Powell and Lake Mead and is just becoming available for the lower basin states to use at a later time. So it was really interesting conversation. I think you guys will hear more about it in June, and hopefully some progress has been made in the negotiations that we'll hear about. But that's what I've got to share tonight.
Thanks for that, Kim. And it was, I was glad I went to that meeting. It was a really striking presentation delivered by people who are sitting at the table in those negotiations. So I'd never seen it or heard it presented. I've been tracking this over the years, and I've never seen it presented quite that way.
Well, thank you, Kim, for that synopsis. Let's hope the negotiators figure out some creative, viable solutions for what seems to be deadlock.
Yes.
Any questions for Kim before we move on to the next agenda item?
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you. The next agenda item is the utilities rate study city kickoff and engagement overview, and we have some esteemed guests joining us. So I'll turn it over to Stephanie, or first Joe.
I think I'll take that first. And before we leave the last item, it really is a privilege to oversee the utilities department. And one of the things that I am super thankful for at this moment is we have a very experienced water resources team. In any given city or department, you can have teams that are just starting out and a lot of greenness and figuring things out as they go. But this team has been doing it for years and benefits from that. And I'm aware of the decisions they're making and the way they're operating, so the community can rest assured that they're in really good hands with the team. So I appreciate that. Our next item is an update on our rate study, and we've been looking at water budgets, and our team has checked in with the board previously, I think in October of 2025 and earlier this year January. So we're talking about water budgets and those prior check-ins. We're now transitioning into the rate study portion of this effort, different phase, which will take what we learned from the water budget efforts and integrate that into the broader study. And so for the rate study phase, tonight will be the initial touch point with the Water Resources Advisory Board. And I mentioned that, just for context, we've previously done rate studies in 2008 and 2018. We're very pleased to have our consultant, Newgen Strategies, here with us tonight. And so I will turn it over to Steph, who probably will add a little bit more by way of introduction before our consultants kind of leave the presentation.
Steph Neiman, I'm the financial analyst at Utilities. As Joe already mentioned, we're kicking off phase 2 of the rate study analysis with Brad. And then back in January, you'll remember we did present a portfolio of water rate alternatives. So we intend to explore that a little bit more during this phase of the analysis. The city hired Newgen Strategies and Solutions, who is here with us tonight to perform the rate study analysis. And they're going to walk through, an overview of the rate study process for all 3 of our utilities. This work will help inform future rate decisions. So we're looking forward to your feedback as we move through this process. There will be some future touch points. So this is just sort of the initial view. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jen.
Okay. Steph, Joe, thank you. Yeah, my name's Dave Yankee. I'm a partner at Newgen Strategy Solutions. With me is Carrie Anderson. She's a senior consultant. And so, yeah, we want to give you an update on where we are with conducting the water, the wastewater, stormwater, cost service study. So I'm going to just show you briefly. Here's the agenda. I'm going to walk through the project team so you know who's working on this. And then I'll hand it over to Carrie. She's going to walk through the study overview, what the scope of services are. We're going to walk through the cost of service, the process we're going through in the 20-year forecast. We'll go through the functionalization. We'll explain what functionalization is in case you wonder. And then we'll also talk about project timeline, the next steps, and go through that. So with regard to the team, again, my name's Dave Yankee. I've been conducting water, wastewater, stormwater, and solid waste cost service studies for over 30 years. So I'm serving as the project manager. Carrie Anderson, Carrie here, has been working with us for over 3 years. She's handling all the financial modeling, the forecasting of the budget, the capital program, all of those items, and then the cost functionalization, rate design, et cetera. Working with her, Savannah has 5 years of experience. She's a senior consultant as well. She's handling all the billing data. So she's taken all that. So far to date, she's been working with that. We do a revenue reconciliation with current rates, make sure billing data is, we've got everything there. It's looking good. She's working with that, which she's been working with Carry On. Their offices are next door to each other, so it's very easy for them to talk, but that will be moved into the overall financial model then. And then finally, I'll mention Eric Colokia. He's serving as deputy project manager. He's got 15 years of experience. He will be leading, he's already been leading the functionalization process that we've gotten into. And then he's going to be working on the water budgeting piece where he has experience in doing the rate design component.
Could you define functionalization?
We're going to do it later. Yes. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carrie and let her take it.
So the overall purpose of our study is to evaluate and update the city's cost of service and rate structures. And so we're going to do that when keeping in mind several key tasks and objectives. So the first one's going to be revenue recovery. This is something that's critical for utilities and ensuring the long-term financial health of the utility overall. It allows you to provide constant and consistent quality service. Next, like Dave mentioned, we're going to be looking at rate design and that water budget policy. So we want to be able to provide clear, actionable recommendations for rates and structures that additionally ensure long-term financial. Two other key things we're gonna be looking at, affordability and equity. These are necessary services that should be reasonably accessible to all. And affordability and equity are social goals as well as operationally and financially. Lastly, community engagement. This is basically kicking off our community engagement. This is something that we plan on continuing throughout the process, and just ensuring transparency and inclusiveness. So here we have our scope of services. We're going to be completing a comprehensive utility rate study for water, wastewater, and stormwater. And here we have listed some key components of that. Cost of service analysis. I'm going to be walking through the steps of the cost of service process, one of which is functionalization. Water budget rate structure evaluation. That's essentially the last step of the cost of service process. Both of those two steps I'll be talking through in more detail later on. Plant investment fee methodology review. The 20-year financial forecast model, we're looking at it from 2026 to 2045, and then community engagement support. So here we have the 6 steps of the cost of service methodology. We start with developing the test year, which we based off of the fiscal year 2026 budget. Step 2, developing revenue requirement forecast. Like I mentioned, this is going to be a 20-year forecast. 3 is functionalization. 4, determination of the billing units. 5, we have cost of service calculation, and then finally rate design. So for step 1, we have the development of the test year. That's essentially an adjusted fiscal year that can be used as a basis for setting rates. It's supposed to be representative of typical conditions, with adjustments for any unusual or one-time expenses. And like I mentioned, based off of the fiscal year 2026 budget. Next, we have the revenue requirement. So that essentially identifies the amount of revenue that a utility needs to recover in order to recover the cost of providing its services. So like I said, we're starting with fiscal year 2026, going all the way out to fiscal year 2045. And so adjustments are made to the categories that are listed here. We start with operating and maintenance expenses. We have debt service, transfers, and then capital. Adjustments are made. So for operating and maintenance, we're doing those based on inflation factors. We looked at several different indices in order to do that. So those being the municipal cost index, the construction cost index, and the producer price index. Additionally, the consumer price index is used. The municipal cost index is basically a weighted average of those other 3 indices, and so that's where that comes in. So that's what we're using for operating and maintenance. Then for debt service and capital, those are being projected based off of currently existing plans or the existing debt service. So those are looking at actual costs rather than just inflating off of the current costs. So next we have functionalization. So functionalization essentially is defining what money is going to be spent on. So it's the process of taking that revenue requirement and then assigning it to each utility's functional components. Through conversations with city staff, we developed the buckets for each of the utilities. So for water, that's going to be supply, treatment, transmission, distribution, and metering. Then for wastewater, we have treatment, collection, capacity, and treatment, collection, and capacity. And then for stormwater, we have water quality, flood, and conveyance. And then across all 3 utilities, we're going to be looking at customer and then general and administration as other buckets. For the purposes of this presentation, I will be using supply as an example throughout. There's a lot going on here, so just starting with the top line, that's where I'm going to be giving most of my examples. So the revenue requirement in component A flows into component B, where we've decided on our functional buckets, and supply being the one we're looking at. Next, we look at cost classification. For supply infrastructure is sized to meet average demand, not peak. So we look at base demand as that cost classification. And then for allocating those costs, we're looking at the average volume. And that's what allows us to place those dollars into different customer classes to see essentially what costs are needed to serve that that customer class. And then, so cost classification and the cost allocation is what we're going to be discussing next. So for billing units, that essentially, that cost classification, I'll start by just talking through the current rate structure. For water, it's based on the count of meters and size and then consumption. So a monthly bill is the monthly service charge by meter size, and then inclining block rates per 1,000 gallons. The block rate structure, it helps to promote conservation and efficient use of water with pricing signals. And then the water budget is based on, is the amount allocated to meet anticipated water needs, and is based on things like type of unit, bedrooms, irrigated area, and the average winter consumption. So for wastewater, it's looking at the count of meters by size. The water meters are essentially used as a surrogate for wastewater meters since those don't exist. And then consumption. The residential bill is looking at average winter consumption for that consumption, which is essentially the average consumption between the months of December, January, February, and March. And then that's recalculated each April. For non-residential accounts, indoor, it's actual consumption, and then indoor and outdoor accounts, it's actual or budget allocation, whichever of those is lower. And then similar to water, that monthly bill is going to be that monthly service charge based on meter size plus the volume rate per 1,000 gallons. Then for stormwater, the monthly bill, it depends on the type of unit. So if it's a detached resident or a single unit, it's fee based on parcel size. And then for others, it's the fixed minimum plus the per square foot of impervious area. And then I will mention additionally, like I said, average volume is something that we're looking at. So we're looking at water produced, the max day, and then the max hour of that water in order to divide across those revenue requirement costs. So next we have actually calculating that cost of service. Those first three bullets are the previous slides that we talked through. So the revenue requirement, defining how much money it costs to run the system as a whole. Functionalization defines what the money is actually being spent on. And then using those billing determinants and allocating them, it defines why the money is being spent. And then we can distribute that across the customer classes to define who is causing that money to be spent. So this kind of walks through that, an example for each of the utilities. I'm going to keep using water as my example. So we're looking at supply again, which is 100% based on base demand. I will go ahead and mention, so it says 8.8 million here. We've gone through creating the test year and working through functionalization, but these numbers are still just preliminary. There could still be adjustments to capital costs per year just based on conversations with city staff. So these are subject to change. It's based on the fiscal year 26 budget. It includes operating maintenance expenses, capital, cash capital, and then existing debt. And then the adjustments that I mentioned previously for any unusual or one-time expenses. So approximately 8.8 million per year to supply water throughout the system. That's for the functionalization step. Then we go to allocation. Water supply is needed to meet average daily demands, like I mentioned, and then we distribute that to who is actually incurring those costs. In this case, we're looking at single family residential, which our preliminary billing determinant calculations was giving us about 38% of average daily demands. So essentially you're taking that 8.8 million, multiplying it by 38%, getting approximately 3.3 million in costs for water supply for single family residential accounts. Then we come to the final step of rate design, which is the final step of cost of service, which is rate design. So this is really a mixture of art and science. We did all of that work to calculate the cost of service by the customer classes, which helps to inform the rates. But actually creating rates isn't just technical, it's policy driven. So we are just providing a defensible basis for putting the rates together. It's based on the alignment with cost of service, revenue stability, affordability, conservation, so on and so forth. There's a lot of things that go into it. It's up to those policymakers to actually make those decisions. So that is calculated in cost of service, but there's a lot of different steps that go into getting to that point. So this is our project timeline. I'm going to go through this in the next 2 slides, but I'll just point out that very last one, community engagement, that's ongoing, and with tonight basically being the start of that process. We have our progress to date. We started with developing the test year based on the fiscal year 26 budget. We went on to the preliminary 20-year forecast, which, like I mentioned, is subject to change based on just a number of different variables, including the capital improvement plan. We went through and used the currently existing plans as a basis for our calculations, but based on calculating the revenue off the building determinants, will actually determine what capital needs to be prioritized and what can actually be spent each year. So that is a continuous process. And then functionalization. Like I mentioned, we went through, determined those buckets and went line by line through the budgets to assign which buckets they go to. But that is also a continuously evolving process. As for next steps, we're finalizing the billing determinants. So far, we've gone through with our revenue reconciliations, which is essentially taking the billing data and pulling the billing determinants like meter counts and consumption and multiplying it against current or historical rates to see what revenue we get out of that and comparing against historical to see how accurate we are. We want to have a relatively low variance from what was actually realized in those years, and that kind of ensures the accuracy of our billing determinants. And then from there, it's used as a foundation for the rest of our calculations. So we're taking our time with that one. Then we'll move on to the cost of service, which will lead into rate design. And then, like I mentioned, continuous community engagement. But thank you for listening, and Dave and I are available for questions.
Good question. I think you were alluding to this at the end, but so the revenue requirement is including CIP, but functionalization does not include CIP. Is that correct?
It does. So we go through and create the revenue requirement based off of operating expenses, debt service, and then the capital plans as well. So we put together proposed debt, and then what can be cash funded off of the capital plan, and that's layered into the revenue requirement. And then we're taking that entire revenue requirement and allocating it out to the buckets.
So is what bucket would like a capital improvement project fall in? Would that be distribution or?
It really depends on the type of project.
So for instance, you've got breakouts, you talked about supply, transmission, distribution. If you were, just as an example, to spend, say, in the next 10 years, we got to spend $60 million on our reservoirs. That would be going to supply. And so then when we're allocating supply, that gets allocated according to how it's being used.
Okay, so you're allocating CIP out to the functional area of whatever that capital project is.
That's
Okay,
correct.
got it. And
Yes.
I guess were you working with Stephanie and team on that 10-year plan? Okay.
Constantly.
Okay.
20-year plan.
20,
Yeah, and so the CIP is actually based on last year's CIP because as you know, we're on that annually. So right now we're kind of in the middle of this year's CIP process, so EJ's working on this.
And I think something that would be important to mention is we have recurring meetings throughout the process, and so we're constantly communicating with updates.
I had the good fortune of sitting in one of the functionalization meetings where we're going through a very, very long list of items. And Stephanie was
making recommendations on how they might be slightly adjusted. So there were hundreds and hundreds of lines of the costs going forward. In the model, what did you end up using for the escalation, O&M escalation? I'm curious, based on, we've had such crazy, weird inflation and escalation over the last 10 years.
I do. So we looked at around here somewhere. Sorry. There we go. So we looked at the municipal cost index, construction cost index, and the producer price index. So for municipal cost index, we looked at a 5-year average from fiscal year 2027 to 2032 for the first 5 years. And then, a 5-year average for 27 through 32. And then thereafter, we used a 20-year average. For the construction cost index, it was a 5-year average for the same period of time. And then we reduced it to 4% thereafter, just through conversations with city staff. And then the producer price index, same as the municipal cost index, 5-year average, and then 20-year average thereafter, starting in 2033.
So the construction escalation further out in the future was 4%. I'm curious about the percentages applied.
So looking back, we looked at the last, you can give some examples there, but like we mentioned, the last 5 historical years, because we've seen that pick up, we use that for the next 5 years. And then we're hoping it slows down. So years 6 through 20, it calms down. But if you want to show like what some of those, like the construction.
And maybe the CCI was based on the Denver specific area for CCI. The reason that I decided or wanted to bump it back down to 4%, that's what we use internally. And as you know, like a 4% compounded over 20 years it raises the cost so much. So we just wanted to maintain consistency between our internal models and what NewGen was using. The CCI is a good basis, I think, for the next 5 years, but we can continue to watch that. And then the goal will be after the study to actually have that model so we can tweak, in next year that comes down.
Do you do any sensitivity analysis? Assuming a little higher, assuming a little lower?
Well, I'll just kind of jump in here real quick. There's so many variables with the cost of service that we're going to be running a lot of rate analysis. And so to compound like more variables on the front end, just kind of, you create so many different options and, later on. So right now we're really trying to like nail a 20-year forecast. We're really trying to get to a good 20-year forecast we're comfortable with in terms of our CIP and then also this operational forecast as well.
Okay, again, and I apologize. These are questions that everybody else knows, but in terms of the billing units, I mean, as a Boulder resident, there's a huge debate ranging in our community about density and growth. And I guess you guys had to make if you're doing a 20-year study, you have to make some decisions. And I'm wondering how you all made that decision. And then I guess, Joe, maybe is it consistent with what the planning is in other departments of the city? So that all, utilities and transportation and all of the other departments of the city are using the same assumptions about growth and, billing units, the effective equivalent of billing units for those other departments?
For sure, and maybe I'll speak to the last part of the question and then turn it back to Steph for the first part. But right now, we're going through an update of the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan.
Yeah.
Which is our overarching document for that kind of thing. And one of the elements that falls out of that is that the city consistently uses the same planning numbers across all departments. There can be some situations where we might deviate from that. For example, if something that's conservative for one department and not for another, we might look at it different ways. But For sure, that is in the mix, and I don't remember the first part of the question, but hopefully Steph does.
Did you actually ask like what is the growth rate that we're using? Right now, we're using historical average of 0.5%, but as
Again, there's compound, I mean, it's 0.5 every year, so.
correct. And so, you know, as conversations continue to evolve, EVCP, you know, we can look at the study and perhaps update that. But right now, we're just trending based on historical growth.
And you're assuming something that's linear.
Yes, right now we are. But again, I feel like with we are doing a 20-year forecast. It's a solid forecast over 20 years, but you know, really we're looking at it for like the first 5 to 7 years. You know, like I feel like we could be really certain with what our costs will be, what our building units will look like over the next 5 to 7 years. As you kind of get out of that forecast, then things become, you know, less certain.
And we'll be doing another rate study.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it gives us a look ahead to see if there are very acute pinch points in the future around certain investments or certain areas of the system. So it's useful in taking that longer term look ahead, but recognizing to focus on the 5 to 7.
And
Thank you.
just quickly, it's not just this effort, but our engineering team looks at those planning numbers for thinking about infrastructure investments and specific growth, if it's gonna be in this area of town or another, what's needed there. Our water resources team, who you heard from tonight, uses those numbers in their projections for water supply, so sees a lot of traction.
And then I think it's a different kind of look ahead, but PIF, thinking about what, you know, the individual unit contributions are to those investment costs from a growth perspective.
I just wanted to go back, because you had a question on the inflation, so I wanted to clarify, you'd asked for numbers. So for instance, for the MCI, the Municipal Cost Index, the last 5 years, it has run at about a 4.8%. The Construction Cost Index last 5 years, 4.7. And then the Producer Price Index was actually at 5.4%.
Right.
So we've got those going forward right
Yeah.
now. I would honestly hope they would maybe be a little high, but right now it doesn't look that way.
2018 and 2014 to 2019, we had construction escalation costs that were below 3%.
Yeah.
So we were operating in a completely different environment.
And unfortunately, we are working with so many clients right now that are spending literally hundreds of millions of dollars on capital projects, and those interest rates, you know, those inflation rates are,
Significant.
yeah, they're probably not unrealistic with what we're seeing, unfortunately.
What are you assuming on demand? I mean, because we've seen when in your earlier presentation, demand is slowing down. Do you assume it continues at that rate, or does it assume level demand?
So in their presentation, they had that going down, which is great to see. Right now, we're getting the budget finalized. We're getting the cost of service, everything done. We're making sure we have billing data for the last 3 years. We're good with that. And then we're going to use that with discussions as we go into water budgeting.
Okay.
What do we want to do going forward for assumptions?
I mean, they're
Correct me if I say anything.
some sensitivity analysis, right? Assuming it goes flat, assuming that reductions continue, because I don't know when there's some physical limits in terms of the reductions, when they just have to level off. But okay.
Yeah. And to Melinda's point earlier about 2002 drought and how, you know, so much of the cities at the time revenues were based on variable demand, right? And so like how much water people were using was very closely connected to how much they were paying on a month-to-month basis. But that creates a lot of vulnerability for the revenue of the system. So Boulder, is you all are thinking right now about what that balance of, you know, the monthly amounts that everyone is paying, and then what is variable on top of that based on usage, instead of having it all be usage based.
And one of the challenges you have with it then too is, again, we just talked about inflation, we're talking about capital costs. If you've got either things you have to upgrade or you've got infrastructure you have to replace, while you're encouraging conservation, which is good because you have finite resources or what have you, you know, the cost per 1,000 gallons is still going up. And so it's a fixed cost business that you're running. And so when I heard that where you have the surcharges, okay, we've seen that. You know, you go, it's not fair, but it's just kind of what running a utility.
A question, and Joanna Jones, maybe more for you all. I guess if what comes out of this is vastly different than what we're doing today, is there kind of a thought as to the most change we want to make? Are we relying on that community engagement, or like, how are you thinking about incorporating this already?
For sure, we're thinking about that. And I think when you zoom up to the highest level and think about this, the way our type of operation runs, we have to recover our cost of service. And I think we have a pretty good handle on what that is. And the rate design is really kind of the mechanics or the algebra of how we do that. And I think each time we do a rate study, we have specific things in mind that in staff's mind that we want to change. As you've heard from previous presentations, one part, especially our commercial billing, is really complicated and like to simplify it. So I don't think customers are going to experience dramatically differently. I think when people hear rate study, they can worry that, oh my God, my bill is going to triple. And it's not that, just we're streamlining the way we design it. So and the customer engagement or community engagement is aimed at bringing people along with that and also getting their feedback of what they're experiencing. We've gotten some really good feedback already from our large commercial customers. So there's not going to be a huge surprise or like a tripling of bills or anything like that. Or you'd be very busy on the board. And so would be next year.
So this may not be a question for the consultants, but and maybe I should have asked it for the earlier presentation, but it struck me when you showed I think it was the per capita usage of water. When we put in the water rates in what year? The budget, water budgets.
2007.
2007, yeah.
Okay. And then it was 2007, but then it was after, it seemed to be level, I don't know, maybe we talked about that. And then it was after was it one of the droughts that it started to fall? Do you have an explanation of why it was level for 3 years and then usage fell, which is good, per capita usage fell, I'm just curious about the cause.
Yeah, so we really saw usage start to fall after the 2002 drought. That was the primary
Yeah.
trigger point.
Okay.
And the main water conservation that we saw within the community was really people changing out to efficient fixtures that had been designed at the federal level. So those toilets, those shower heads, things of that nature. And that adoption was slow and happened gradually over time.
Okay. And I'm just curious, do we have a projection of when that does it continue accelerate or does it bottom out?
Yeah, so it might surprise you that Steph and I are talking all the time and projecting demands. And I think the level of conservative and the right way to estimate it depends on the situation.
Yeah.
So we have our water supply planning scenarios where we do a few different levels of demand, but then we have financial forecasts where there's different sensitivities. And so we want to anticipate that. So I don't know that anybody has a solid crystal ball of like, it'll look exactly like this. But we are using sensitivity analyses and we have a sense of from an outdoor water demand, how much more water we can save.
I'm curious about the PINs. And since we didn't talk about that a whole lot tonight, but I think we've talked a little bit before about how development should pay their fair share. Now that's one of the policies in the comp plan. So I'm curious, have you gotten any feedback on that so far in the rate study from the community? Like how are folks feel about that? What are your thoughts?
I think the team could probably answer that better, but I think that's future state of the analysis. We haven't really gotten there yet, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and that'll have some internal stakeholders as well, like talking to our planning and development department and others who are like pretty entrenched in that world. So that'll come in the future.
Yeah. Thank you. If there aren't any more questions, I think we can move on.
I think so, and I might sum up by saying that the board will have additional touches, as Gary noted in that timeline, and also just a reminder that over the years, for some of these efforts, we will sometimes invite a board member in to follow along with us. We did that for the water efficiency plan in 2022 or 23, and oftentimes there's a board member that has a background that syncs with whatever effort we're doing. And for this one, Amy graciously offered her time to help us out on that and has a background that syncs with this type of work. So we really appreciate that.
Be involved. So the last couple of items on the agenda here, we had matters from the board. So does anyone from the board have anything they'd like to bring? So looking at Isabel's water, so yeah. Yeah, so you want to put it up? There you go, right. So Melinda and Joel, did you either of you have any matters you wanted to bring to the board tonight? No. Okay, great. Teach me. Pretty much every board meeting, we take a pause so that if there's any matters that the board brought, would like to bring to the attention of other board members or staff and other folks that are here, we give that opportunity, and then we turn it over to Joe to see if there's and the team to see if there are any matters from staff that we would like to bring to our attention, other than what we've discussed.
Yeah, thanks for that. And usually I do have a few odds and ends to share, and but tonight I don't. The one thing that was on my mind for matters was Kim's update on the Colorado River, and we just decided it made more sense to cover that since it was so synced up with the water supply update. So I don't have anything on that, and if you'd like, board, I can move on to the future schedule.
Great.
And so a pretty significant shift in the future schedule that you may have noticed is the capital improvement program. We usually do a 3-meeting series for that. That historically has been May, June, and July. And like other departments with boards, we've been asked to change that so that we sync up with our internal budget process and don't get in front of that before boards are making recommendations. And so this year, the CIP will be July, August, and September. Really doesn't change anything for us in terms of our process or what we do. It's just making sure it's not out of order. So with that, we really don't have a need to have a meeting in May. And so there'll be no meeting in May unless something comes up, which I doubt. And then the thought in June was to have a business meeting where we do that Colorado River update with the visitors from Northern Water, and then probably combine that with a project tour. And we're thinking about our major phosphorus upgrades project that took place at the Water Resource Recovery Facility. And then in July, we will start that 3-month CIP process with an information item on the capital improvement programs. Normally in that 3-month series, we start out with just a reminder for ourselves and for the board of where we left off the year before. And then we take it from there in subsequent months. And also looking like we'll have an information item
and another rate study update in July as well. So that is what I have for future schedules.
Sounds good. So no meeting in May, meeting in June, July, August. Great. I think we're motion to adjourn. Adjourn. When I think about it. Okay, are we ready to adjourn?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff and new Jen.
Thank you.
You bet.
Oh, you will be.
Lots of years.